2019, rural Ontario. You think you have beaten the system. A small town advertises serviced lots for $1, and you are already picturing the off-grid cabin, the solar panels, the rainwater catchment. Then you actually read the paperwork. Buried under the glossy brochure is the Ontario Building Code, Division B, Part 9, plus a zoning bylaw that says any dwelling must connect to approved water and sewage systems and meet current energy efficiency standards. The clerk smiles and repeats the line from the council meeting. We welcome development, but it has to be safe and up to code. Translation, you can buy the land as long as you also buy the hookups, the inspections, the engineer's stamp, and the right to be told how to live on it. Tonight, we are going to walk through 10 Canadian towns that promise free land and the regulations that make damn sure you never really escape the grid. You have watched the homestead channels. You have seen the thumbnails that scream free land in Canada, build your dream cabin. You are ready to disappear. By 2020, small prairie towns in Saskatchewan and Manitoba were running free or $1 lot schemes to attract residents. The cultural myth is powerful. Buy land, drill a well, install solar panels, use a composting toilet, no boss, no landlord, no meter spinning on the side of your house. The 10 towns list looks like bait. Municipal websites boast low-cost serviced lots, incentive programs, and no development charges. Every listing makes it sound like freedom is one signature away. Here is what they do not mention up front. Every one of these offers has a bylaw link hidden under the word details. That link leads to pages of conditions you will not understand until you have already committed. So you think free land means freedom. By the end of this, you will realize it usually means something else. An obligation. By 2018, small towns across Saskatchewan and Manitoba were offering lots for $1 or deeply discounted land to reverse population decline. The municipal logic is straightforward. They lose tax base. Services cost more per person, so councils roll out incentive lots tied to building commitments. Consider the town of Mundare, Alberta, which made headlines selling downtown lots for a loonie, if buyers agreed to develop them under town rules and timelines. The regulatory anchor is a development agreement requiring a code-compliant home finished within a set period, fully serviced with municipal water and sewer connections. Miss the deadline or fail to meet specifications, and the lot reverts or penalties apply. The economic translation is simple. The land is $1. The service hookups, permits, and a code-compliant build run $200,000 and up. That is not a gift. That is a funnel. You thought the hard part was buying land. It turns out the hard part is being allowed to live on it. By 2021, Ontario and British Columbia had updated building and energy codes that quietly raised the entry price for legal dwellings again. Here is the split most buyers never understand. Land ownership is not the same as occupancy rights. Municipalities cannot stop you from buying raw land, but they can absolutely stop you from legally occupying any structure on it without a certificate of occupancy. Ontario Building Code requirements include a permanent foundation, an approved potable water source, and connection to the electrical grid or an approved alternative designed by a professional. Municipal bylaws add minimum dwelling sizes, septic engineering, and year-round habitability standards. The certificate of occupancy, a little piece of paper that sounds like a formality, decides whether your home is real or illegal. Without it, you are technically camping on your own property. With enough complaints or inspections, you face orders to vacate. The idea, my land, my rules, runs straight into their codes and their enforcement. And if you think that certificate is just a formality, wait until you see what happens when you try to live there without it. In 2019, rural townships in eastern Ontario quietly promoted low-cost lots while enforcing some of the strictest small building rules in the country. The regulatory anchor is the Ontario Building Code Energy Efficiency section, often referenced as Part 9 and SB 12, plus local septic bylaws requiring engineered systems and inspections. A couple buys a bargain lot in a small township, planning a modest off-grid home with a composting toilet and rainwater collection. The township responds, no permit without an engineered septic system, a minimum dwelling size, and proof of year-round water supply. Economic breakdown, land costs $1 or a token fee. Septic design and installation runs tens of thousands. Building permit, development charges, and mandatory inspections add several more thousands. The free land costs more than a suburban lot with services already in place. Official line, protecting groundwater and public health. Translation, if you cannot afford a suburban grade system, you do not get to exist here full-time. And if you think Ontario is overbearing, British Columbia takes it and wraps it in bright green climate branding. In 2017, British Columbia introduced its Energy Step Code, a voluntary path to net zero-ready buildings that municipalities quickly embedded in their bylaws. In plain language, these are performance-based energy rules that often require energy modeling, blower door testing, and professional design verification. The code applies even to small rural builds in many jurisdictions. A solo builder in interior British Columbia tries to claim a cheap lot and erect a super insulated cabin with DIY solar. The local government requires step code compliance verified by certified energy advisors and engineers. Professional fees alone blow his budget before he buys a single board. The impossible math is this: a cheap lot for less than $5,000, then step code compliance overhead, including consultants, testing, and design revisions, runs $10,000 to $20,000 before materials. The official line is that higher performance buildings save energy and money. Translation, no more simple cabins built by hand. Hire professionals or stay in the city renting. That is the green version of control. Alberta sells you freedom on a billboard and then traps you in a different way. Back in 2012, the town of Mundare, Alberta made headlines for selling downtown lots for $1 to attract builders. The surface story was welcoming development, boosting small-town economies. Bring your business, build your dream. The fine print told a different story. Development agreements set deadlines for construction, minimum building values, and full code compliance with provincial building standards and the fire code. Local bylaws required connection to municipal utilities where available. A tradesman buys one of these lots expecting to build a partially off-grid live workshop. The town insists on full commercial-grade fire separations, sprinklers, and accessibility standards designed for large urban storefronts applied to his tiny town project. The economic squeeze is real. Building to big city commercial specifications on a small town lot wipes out the cost advantage. Banks will not finance the project without a long-term business plan that justifies the investment. The official slogan was "Open for Business." Translation, open for exactly the same kind of building we already understand and can tax easily. If you think the conservative heartland is tough, wait until you see how Quebec wraps your dream homestead in paperwork, in both languages. By 2020, rural municipalities in Quebec were offering cheap lots while operating under some of the most centralized code and language rules in the country. The regulatory anchors are the Quebec Construction Code and zoning bylaws requiring plans stamped by professionals recognized by provincial orders. Language laws require applications and supporting documents in French, with extra procedural hoops for non-francophone applicants unfamiliar with how the system actually works. An Anglophone couple from Ontario buys a bargain lot in the Gaspé region, drawn by the low price and the dream of building a small, partially off-grid home. They submit an English language building plan. The municipality responds with a list of demands, French translations of all documents, engineer stamps from Quebec licensed professionals only, and adherence to prescriptive standards that assume full utility services are available and will be used. The economic drag accumulates quickly. Translation fees for technical documents. Out-of-province professionals rejected because they lack Quebec credentials. Multiple rounds of resubmission stretching across months of waiting. By the time they understand the system well enough to navigate it, they have spent thousands on paperwork alone, and they have not poured a foundation yet. Official line, harmonizing standards and protecting the French language. Translation, if you are not already plugged into the Quebec professional ecosystem, good luck building anything unconventional on your cheap land. Still think you'll just drive further north and escape it? Saskatchewan would like a word, with a development agreement attached. Since the early 2000s, prairie towns in Saskatchewan and Manitoba experimented with free or $1 lots to reverse decades of rural population decline. The headlines made it sound like homesteading was back. Claim your land, build your cabin, live free under the big sky. The regulatory anchors tell a different story. Municipal bylaws tie these lots to time-limited building commitments and full compliance with the National Building Code as adopted by both provinces. Health regulations require engineered septic systems designed and inspected by licensed professionals. Some jurisdictions explicitly prohibit composting toilets as primary waste treatment, regardless of how well they function. A young family claims a nearly free lot in a Manitoba village, planning a mortgage-free, small off-grid home that would let them escape the rental trap. They discover requirements for a full concrete foundation, minimum square footage that exceeds their budget, mechanical ventilation systems, and hookups to water or cisterns built to exacting provincial specifications. The impossible math becomes clear. Land is essentially free. Compliance costs, including foundation, engineered septic, approved water system, inspections, permits, and professional fees easily exceed the cost of buying a modest existing house in a nearby town where services are already in place and paid for. Official line, bringing new families to our community. Translation, we'll give you cheap dirt as long as you build a normal suburban house, connect to our systems, and pay taxes like everyone else. So if land can be almost free, but living on it is nearly impossible, what game are they really playing? That's where Act 3 comes in. In 2022, in rural Ontario, a woman finally finished her small home on a low-cost lot, powered entirely by solar panels and a battery bank she had carefully designed and installed. She did everything she thought was right. She researched, she planned, she built it herself. She passed structural inspections without issue. The framing was sound, the roof was solid, the insulation exceeded code minimums. Then the electrical inspector refused to sign off on occupancy because her system was not grid-tied and lacked an engineer's certification verifying code-compliant backup power arrangements. The regulatory anchor is the municipal interpretation of building code requirements for reliable year-round power and fire regulations governing battery installations in occupied dwellings. Her off-grid system worked perfectly. It had powered her construction for months. It just did not fit the paperwork pathway the inspector was required to follow. The consequences cascaded immediately. Without occupancy approval, insurance companies denied coverage for the structure. Without insurance, banks refused to consider any kind of mortgage or home equity arrangement. Her finished, functional, energy-independent home became legally uninhabitable, a structure she owned but could not officially live in. The economic hit was devastating. Retrofitting a grid connection she did not need and hiring engineers to certify her existing system would wipe out the entire budget advantage that drove her off-grid in the first place. The savings she had built her life around vanished into compliance costs. Official line, ensuring reliable power and safety. Translation, don't you dare prove you can exist without the grid. And she's not alone. In the West, another couple learned what happens when you build first and ask permission later. Around 2019, in interior British Columbia, a couple built a small cabin on cheap land, assuming they could make it legal later once they demonstrated the home was safe and functional. No permits, composting toilet, rainwater collection, wood stove for heat, off-grid solar for power. They lived quietly for months, bothering no one, until a neighbor complaint triggered an inspection visit from the regional district. The enforcement sequence was swift and unforgiving. The regional district issued a stop work order, followed by a formal order demanding either removal of the structure or code-compliant upgrades within a specified timeline. The regulatory anchors were British Columbia building bylaws applying to all dwelling units regardless of size or grid connection, and health authority rules explicitly banning long-term occupancy without approved sewage disposal and potable water systems. The economic crush was total, bringing the cabin up to code, including an engineered septic system, an approved water source with testing documentation, electrical certification by a licensed contractor, and structural verification by an engineer, would cost significantly more than rebuilding from scratch with proper permits obtained in advance. The couple could not afford either option. Their savings were already spent on the land and the cabin itself. The outcome was that they removed or abandoned the cabin they had built with their own hands. The land sits technically available but completely unusable for anything resembling their original dream of simple, independent living. Official line, bringing unauthorized construction into compliance. Translation, we can tolerate your fantasy as long as you never actually try to live it. Think you'll dodge this by following every rule perfectly from the start? Ask the retiree who did everything right and still got forced back onto the grid. In 2021, in a small town on the Canadian prairies, a retired man lived peacefully on a low-cost lot he had purchased years earlier. He used a deep well for water and a perfectly functional septic system he had installed and maintained himself. Everything worked. Everything was paid off. His monthly expenses were minimal, exactly as he had planned for his retirement years. Then the town upgraded its infrastructure, extending municipal water and sewer lines into his area. Shortly after, the council passed a bylaw requiring all properties within a certain distance of municipal service lines to connect to town water and sewer systems, whether they wanted to or not. The regulatory anchor was common municipal powers granted under provincial legislation to mandate service connections for public health and environmental protection. His functional, privately maintained systems that had worked reliably for years, became legally insufficient overnight through no action of his own. The economic numbers were brutal. Connection fees ran into the tens of thousands of dollars. Monthly utility bills would continue indefinitely for the rest of his life. Decommissioning his well and septic system added additional costs on top. He had gone off-grid specifically to reduce expenses in retirement. Now compliance would eat what remained of his savings and add ongoing costs he had structured his entire retirement to avoid. The official line was ensuring equity of service and environmental standards. Translation, you will be a paying customer or you will be in violation. Ontario, British Columbia, Alberta, Quebec. The prairies, different political rhetoric, different climate branding, same practical outcome. At this point, it is not about one province or one bad bylaw. It is about understanding the machine you are actually stepping into when you hear the words free land. Rewind to the opening fantasy. You, a cheap lot, a cabin, a wood stove, and no bills. Independence, simplicity, freedom from the systems that seem to extract money from you at every turn. Now lay out the 3 invisible grids that come permanently attached to that free land. The regulatory grid, building codes, health rules, environmental standards, safety inspections, all written for suburban subdivisions and urban developments, applied without exception or adjustment to your 400-square-foot cabin in the woods. The professional grid, mandatory engineers, certified energy advisors, licensed trades and their non-negotiable fees, gatekeepers who must sign off on your work before you can legally occupy what you built with your own hands and your own money. The utility grid, water, sewer, and power infrastructure with bylaws that nudge or outright force you to connect, ensuring you remain a paying customer whether you need their services or you want them. Here is the short, sharp breakdown. The land might be free. The permission to occupy it is not. The ability to live there on your own terms is definitely not. Cheap prairie lots come with mandatory suburban-grade construction requirements. British Columbia energy standards quietly outlaw simple hand-built cabins. Ontario septic rules make alternative waste systems effectively illegal for year-round occupancy. Quebec buries you in paperwork, language requirements, and professional certifications before you can drive a single nail. They do not need to ban off-grid living outright. They just make the legal version so complicated and expensive that most people give up before they ever break ground or give up after they have already invested everything they had. So where does that leave you, the person who just Googled free land in Canada thinking you had found a loophole in the system? You are not crazy for wanting out. You are not paranoid for noticing patterns. This is how modern regulatory systems work, through codes and compliance requirements, not chains and fences. You started this journey believing you could claim land and be left alone to build a simple life. You met 10 towns that use free land as bait, a marketing tool to attract new taxpayers and utility customers who will pay into municipal systems for decades. You saw how every regulation has a plausible justification on paper and a very predictable winner in practice. The municipality that collects permit fees, the utility company that bills monthly, the professional class that charges for mandatory sign-offs you cannot legally bypass. The moral question is not whether any individual regulation is wrong in isolation. It is whether the cumulative pattern is accidental or designed. Is this really about public safety and climate protection and groundwater quality? Or is it about keeping every human body plugged into a billable system, one permit fee, one inspection charge, one mandatory utility connection at a time? Picture that same empty lot at sunrise, the one from the brochure. The sign still says incentive lot, build your dream. Behind it, invisible but absolutely binding, a stack of bylaws, permit applications, engineering requirements, professional certification mandates, and utility connection obligations that will follow you for as long as you own the property. You thought free land meant freedom. Now you know it means something else entirely. Read the code before you sign anything, and never forget who wrote it and who benefits when you comply. If you want more real breakdowns of how systems like this actually work, hit subscribe. No one in government is going to explain it to you.